Dr. Vera Cross pressed her palm against the cool metal wall of Research Station Omega and took a deep breath. Through the observation deck's massive viewport, she could see the sleek, crystalline ships of the Nexaran delegation approaching. After 3 years of long-distance communications, first contact was finally happening in person. "Nervous?" asked her research partner, Dr. Kim Santos, as she joined Vera at the window. "Terrified," Vera admitted, adjusting her lab coat for the 10th time. 3 years of preparing for this moment, and I still feel like I'm going to mess it up somehow." The Nexarans were unlike any species humanity had encountered. Their communications had revealed a civilization that thought in patterns rather than linear sequences, experienced emotions as colors, and viewed individual identity as fluid rather than fixed. Vera had spent countless hours studying their preliminary data, but theoretical knowledge felt inadequate now. Station Commander Jace Sterling's voice crackled over the intercom. "All personnel to positions. The Nexaran delegation will be docking in 10 minutes. Vera made her way to the main laboratory, where the centerpiece of today's demonstration waited. The quantum resonance chamber hummed quietly, its translucent walls containing a field of pure energy that responded to biological neural patterns. It was designed to create a bridge between different forms of consciousness, allowing species to share basic emotional concepts despite communication barriers. "Remember," Dr. Santos said, running final checks on the equipment, "we're just demonstrating basic empathic resonance. Nothing complex. Let them feel simple emotions, like curiosity or contentment." The laboratory doors whispered open, and Vera's breath caught. The Nexaran delegation entered with fluid grace, their forms immediately capturing her attention. They were humanoid but ethereal, with skin that seemed to shift between pale silver and soft blue, depending on the light. Their eyes were larger than human eyes, multifaceted like gems, and they moved with a synchronicity that suggested constant subliminal communication. The lead figure stepped forward, and Vera felt her heart skip. He was tall and lean, with features that were both alien and surprisingly familiar. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonic undertones that made her skin tingle. "I am Keth, diplomatic liaison for Nexara Prime," he said, his English accented with musical inflections. "We are honored to finally meet in physical form." "Dr. Vera Cross," she replied, extending her hand. When their fingers touched, she felt a jolt of electricity, but dismissed it as nerves. "Welcome to our research station." Keth's eyes widened slightly, and she noticed the silver tones in his skin brighten momentarily. "Thank you. We are eager to experience your demonstration of consciousness bridging." As Vera explained the quantum resonance chamber, she found herself drawn to Keth's intense focus. His multifaceted eyes seemed to track not just her words, but her movements, her expressions, even her breathing patterns. It was unsettling and oddly intimate. "The field will allow us to share basic emotional states," she explained, gesturing to the chamber. "Nothing invasive, just simple feelings to establish common ground between our species." "Fascinating," Keth said, stepping closer to examine the equipment. "On Nexara, we share consciousness naturally, through what you might call psychic resonance. This artificial method intrigues us." Dr. Santos initiated the startup sequence, and the chamber began to glow with soft, pulsing light. "If you're ready, Dr. Cross and Liaison Keth, please step into the field." Vera felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with anxiety as she entered the chamber. Keth joined her, and immediately she noticed how the air seemed to shimmer between them. The energy field responded to their presence, creating patterns of light that danced around their bodies. "Think of something peaceful," Vera instructed, closing her eyes and focusing on a memory of sunset over Earth's ocean. The moment she formed the image in her mind, something extraordinary happened. The peaceful feeling didn't just flow from her into the field, It amplified and reflected back, carrying with it something else. Another consciousness, alien yet somehow familiar, touched hers with gentle curiosity. Vera's eyes snapped open to find Keth staring at her with wonder. "I felt your ocean," he whispered. "The warmth of your sun, the salt in the air. And I felt—" Vera struggled to find words. Crystal gardens? Singing stones? Before either could respond, the chamber's energy spiked unexpectedly. Alarms began blaring as the field intensity climbed beyond safe parameters. Dr. Santos rushed to the controls, but the equipment seemed to be responding to something beyond their programming. "Shut it down!" Commander Sterling's voice boomed over the comm, but Vera couldn't move. The connection with Keth had become a torrent of shared sensation. She felt his surprise, his concern, his growing wonder as their minds touched in ways the equipment was never designed to facilitate. Through his consciousness, she experienced colors that had no names, emotions that existed in harmonics rather than simple states. "I can't break the connection," Dr. Santos shouted over the alarms. Keth reached out instinctively, grasping Vera's hand. The moment their skin touched, the chaotic energy in the chamber suddenly stabilized, but something fundamental had changed. Vera could feel Keth's presence in her mind, not as an intrusion, but as a natural extension of her own awareness. When the field finally dissipated and they stepped out of the chamber, Vera realized that the connection hadn't ended. She could still sense Keth's emotions, his thoughts brushing against hers, like whispers in a quiet room. From the expression of amazement and concern on his face, she knew he was experiencing the same thing. "What just happened?" she asked, but somehow she already knew his answer before he spoke it. "I believe," Keth said slowly, "we have just discovered something neither of our species expected." Commander Jace Sterling paced the medical bay like a caged predator. His jaw clenched as he watched the teams of human and Nexran specialists examine Vera and Keth. 12 hours had passed since the incident, and the connection between the two seemed to be strengthening rather than fading. "Any progress?" he demanded, turning to Dr. Marcus Webb, the station's chief psychologist. "It's unlike anything we've documented," Dr. Webb replied, reviewing his readings. "Their neural patterns are synchronizing in ways that shouldn't be possible between different species. When Dr. Cross experiences stress, Keth's bio-readings spike. When he focuses on calming thoughts, her cortisol levels drop." On the Nexran side of the bay, Zena, Keth's cultural advisor, moved with fluid grace between monitoring devices that looked more like living sculptures than medical equipment. Her skin shifted through worried purples and oranges as she communicated, with her team through harmonized tones that made the humans' teeth ache. "The bond patterns match our ancient texts," Zena said, her accented English carrying notes of concern. "But such connections were thought to be myth, stories from our pre-civilization era." Vera sat on the examination table, trying to focus on Dr. Webb's questions while simultaneously experiencing Keth's growing frustration from across the room. It was disorienting, like trying to have a conversation while someone else's emotions played as background music in her mind. "Can you describe what you're feeling right now?" Dr. Webb asked, stylus poised over his tablet. "Hungry," Vera said, then frowned. "No, wait, I'm not hungry. Keth is, and he's worried about something. About me, I think." She looked across the room where Keth was surrounded by his own medical team. Their eyes met, and she felt a wave of protective concern that definitely wasn't her own emotion. Commander Sterling's expression darkened. "This is a diplomatic nightmare. How do I explain to Earth Command that our first contact mission resulted in our lead scientist becoming psychically bonded to an alien diplomat?" "With respect, Commander," Dr. Webb interrupted, "the bigger concern is their health. We attempted to separate them by more than 50 meters yesterday, and both began showing signs of severe distress. Elevated heart rates, disorientation, physical pain. Vera remembered that experiment all too well. The moment Kath had been escorted to the far end of the station, she'd felt like part of her soul was being stretched thin. The sensation had been so intensely uncomfortable that she'd actually doubled over, clutching her chest. Across the station, Kath had experienced the same thing. Xena approached Commander Sterling, her skin now cycling through diplomatic blues and golds. We must consider that this bonding may not be accidental. Our histories speak of evolutionary leaps during times of great change. Evolutionary leaps? Sterling's voice rose. Are you suggesting this was supposed to happen? Not supposed, Xena corrected gently. But perhaps ... inevitable, when two consciousness-capable species meet for the first time. Perhaps the universe seeks to create bridges. Dr. Webb looked up from his readings. There's something else. Their brain activity is showing patterns consistent with accelerated learning. Dr. Cross, you've been unconsciously incorporating Nexaran linguistic patterns into your speech. And Keth has been demonstrating understanding of human cultural concepts he shouldn't have access to. Vera touched her throat, suddenly aware that her last few sentences had carried subtle harmonic undertones. I can feel him learning, she admitted. Not just thoughts, but memories. I know what Nexaran crystal gardens smell like, even though I've never been to his world. From across the room, Keth's voice carried clearly despite the distance. And I understand why humans cry when they're happy. The emotion has color and texture through Vera's experiences. The intimacy of the statement made both medical teams uncomfortable. Commander Sterling ran a hand through his graying hair. We need solutions, people. Earth Command wants Dr. Cross back on Earth for extensive study. The Nexaran High Council is demanding Keth's immediate return to their homeworld. Separation could be dangerous, Dr. Webb warned. We don't know the full extent of this bond. Forcing them apart could cause permanent psychological damage to both. Xena's skin flashed alarmed oranges. Or physical harm. In our old stories, bonded pairs who were forcibly separated sometimes fell into permanent stasis. Their life forces became so intertwined that losing the connection meant losing the will to live. Vera felt her stomach drop and immediately sensed Keth's matching dread. The idea of being separated from him, this being she'd known for less than 2 days, filled her with a panic that seemed disproportionate to logic, but felt absolutely real to her heart. There has to be a way to reverse it, Commander Sterling insisted. Run more tests. Try different treatments. I don't care if you have to bring in specialists from every human colony and the entire Nexaran Medical Corps. As if summoned by his words, the medical bay doors opened to admit a new figure. Dr. Marcus Webb straightened as a woman in Admiral's insignia entered, flanked by guards. Admiral Torres, Commander Sterling said, his voice carefully neutral. I wasn't expecting you. Emergency protocols, Commander. When first contact goes sideways, the Colonial Administration takes direct control. Admiral Torres surveyed the room with sharp eyes. I've reviewed the preliminary reports. This situation poses significant security risks to both species. Vera felt Keth's alarms spike through their connection, and her own protective instincts flared in response. We're not a security risk, she said, standing from the examination table. We're two individuals dealing with an unprecedented situation. Dr. Cross, you're a civilian scientist who now has an uncontrolled psychic link to an alien entity. That makes you, by definition, a security concern. Alien entity? Vera's voice rose. His name is Keth. He's a person, not a thing. Admiral Torres studied her with calculating eyes. And that emotional response proves my point. Your objectivity has been compromised. You can no longer be trusted to act in humanity's best interests. Across the room, Keth stood abruptly, his skin shifting to warning patterns of deep red and silver. "If you harm her," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the air vibrate, "you will face the full response of the Nexran Defense Fleet." The medical bay fell silent. 2 species, 2 individuals, and now 2 governments drawing battle. Lines around a bond that neither Vera nor Keth had chosen, but both were beginning to understand they couldn't live without. Admiral Torres smiled coldly. "Gentlemen, ladies, I think we have our answer. This bond has already compromised both subjects' loyalty to their respective species. Immediate separation and isolation protocols are now in effect." As security teams from both species moved to escort Vera and Keth to separate quarters, Vera felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. Through their connection, she sensed Keth's matching determination. Whatever was happening to them, they would face it together, even if the entire galaxy stood against them. Dr. Marcus Webb had never felt more like a mediator between warring factions than he did sitting across from Thyra, the Nexran healer who had arrived with their emergency medical team. Her skin rippled through frustrated purples and golds as she gestured toward the sealed chambers where Vera and Keth had been confined. "Your species approaches this with such violence," Thyra said, her voice carrying undertones of distress. "Forcing separation, speaking of isolation protocols. Do you not understand that consciousness bonds are sacred?" "Sacred or not, Admiral," Torres interjected from her position near the viewport, "they represent a security breach. Dr. Cross has access to classified human technologies and strategic information. Liaison Keth presumably has similar access to Nexran secrets. Their bond makes both of them walking intelligence leaks." Dr. Webb studied the bio readings from both isolation chambers on his tablet, even separated by thick walls and energy barriers. Vera and Keth's neural patterns continued to synchronize. Their heart rates matched, their brain waves pulsed in harmony, and both were showing signs of increasing distress. "Admiral, with respect, the medical data suggests that forcing separation is causing more problems than it's solving. Their cortisol levels are spiking, immune systems are becoming compromised, and both are showing early signs of neurological strain." Thyra's skin flashed agreement in bright blues. "In our medical understanding, consciousness bonds create shared life force. When bonded individuals are separated, both begin to experience what your language might call spiritual starvation. Spiritual starvation isn't a recognized medical condition," Admiral Torres replied coldly. "Perhaps not in human medicine," Thyra said, "but Keth is not human. Our physiologies may be similar, but our consciousness operates on different principles. When a Nexran forms a deep bond, our entire nervous system adapts to accommodate the connection. Severing it abruptly is like removing half of someone's brain." Through the chamber's observation window, Dr. Webb could see Vera pacing. Restlessly, she would occasionally stop and press her palm against the wall in the direction of Keth's chamber, her face twisted with concentration, as if trying to reach through solid metal and energy fields. "She's trying to maintain contact," he observed. Even unconsciously, she's oriented toward his location. In the other chamber, Keth sat in what appeared to be a meditative position, but his skin constantly shifted through agitated patterns of silver and deep blue. Every few minutes, he would extend his hand toward Vera's chamber, fingers spread as if trying to touch something just beyond reach. "How long before this becomes dangerous?" Dr. Webb asked Thyra. "For Keth, perhaps 3 more days before permanent. Neural damage. For Dr. Cross." Thyra's skin rippled with uncertainty. "Human consciousness is more compartmentalized than ours. She might survive longer, but the psychological trauma could be severe." Admiral Torres turned from the viewport. "Then we need to work faster. I've authorized Dr. Webb to use experimental psychological techniques to sever the bond. Simultaneously, Your people can work on Kef. No. Thyra's skin flashed brilliant red, a color Dr. Webb had learned indicated absolute refusal. We will not participate in what amounts to consciousness mutilation. Then you're condemning both of them to security detention for the rest of their lives, Admiral Torres said, because I cannot allow individuals with compromised loyalty to return to their homeworlds with the information they now possess. Dr. Webb felt a growing sense of urgency as he watched both patients' vital signs continue to deteriorate. Admiral, perhaps we're approaching this wrong. Instead of trying to break the bond, what if we studied it? The potential applications. For diplomacy, for understanding between species, the potential applications for espionage and manipulation are too great. Torres cut him off. Imagine if either government could create artificial bonds with enemy agents. Imagine the intelligence. Coups, the strategic advantages. Through the chamber walls, they could hear Vera's voice raised in distress. The universal translator picked up fragments. ... Can feel him weakening. Please, just let me see him ... Thyra stood abruptly, her skin cycling through patterns of determination. I invoke cultural sanctuary protocols. Keth is under Nexaran medical protection. We will not allow harm to come to him through forced psychological manipulation. And I invoke colonial security protocols, Admiral Torres replied. Dr. Cross is under military protection from alien influence. Dr. Webb realized they had reached an impasse that could destroy any hope of peaceful resolution. More importantly, while the politicians and military leaders argued jurisdiction, Vera and Keth were slowly dying. There's something else, he sighed, pulling up new data on his tablet. The bond appears to be evolving. Their neural synchronization is increasing, but so is something else. They're sharing memories. Thyra's skin brightened with interest. Memories? Show me. Dr. Webb displayed brain scans showing unusual activity in both patients' hippocampus regions. Vera is demonstrating knowledge of Nexaran cultural concepts. She never learned. She's been unconsciously humming melodic patterns that match Keth's childhood lullabies. And Keth has begun incorporating human colloquialisms and showing understanding of Earth historical events he couldn't possibly know. Fascinating, Thyra breathed. They're not just bonded, they're becoming integrated. Two consciousness streams beginning to merge into something new. Admiral Torres stepped closer to examine the data. That's even worse from a security standpoint. If they're sharing memories, then each has access to the other's entire life experience. Or, Dr. Webb said quietly, they're becoming the first truly bicultural beings in galactic history. Imagine what they could teach us about bridging the gap between species. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the medical bay. The bio-readings from both chambers spiked into dangerous territory, and through the observation windows, they could see Vera collapsed against her chamber wall, while Keth's meditation posture had become rigid, his skin cycling rapidly through distress patterns. They're going into neural shock, Dr. Webb shouted over the alarms. The separation is killing them. Thyra moved toward the chamber controls. We must reunite them immediately. Admiral Torres blocked her path. Absolutely not. If they die, it's regrettable, but it solves our security problem. If they die, Thyra said, her skin flashing dangerous patterns of silver and black, it will be considered an act of war by the Nexaran High Council. They're not just any diplomat and scientist through their bond. They've become representatives of interspecies cooperation. Harming them harms the peace process. Dr. Webb looked between the two authority figures and at his patients, who were clearly in crisis. Sometimes, he realized, medical ethics had to override political considerations. I'm sorry, Admiral, he said, reaching for the emergency release on both chambers. But I took an oath to do no harm. As the containment fields deactivated and Both chamber doors opened. Vera stumbled out and immediately began moving toward Keth's chamber. He emerged at the same moment, and when they saw each other, both stopped, trembling with relief. They didn't run to each other instead. They approached slowly, like two parts of a complex mechanism finally able to reconnect, when Vera placed her palm against Keth's chest, and he covered her hand with his own. The medical monitors showed their bio-readings stabilizing almost instantly. "Better?" Dr. Webb asked gently. "Like breathing again," Vera whispered, not taking her eyes off Keth's face. "Like finding the missing half of the music," Keth added, his skin cycling through peaceful blues and golds. Admiral Torres watched this reunion with calculating eyes. "This changes nothing. You're both still security risks." "Perhaps," Keth said, his voice carrying new harmonics that seemed to include traces of Vera's vocal patterns, "we could become something else instead." "Such as?" Torres demanded. Vera looked up at the Admiral, and Dr. Webb noticed that her expression carried some of Keth's serene confidence. "Bridges," she said simply, "between your people and ours." Ambassador Helena Voss arrived on Research Station Omega with a delegation that included 3 admirals, 2 xenobiologists, and a team of consciousness researchers from the Mars colony. Her reputation for resolving impossible diplomatic situations preceded her, but as she studied the reports on Vera and Keth's bond, she wondered if this might be the case that finally stumped her. "The political ramifications are staggering," she said, addressing the Joint Human-Nexaran Council that had assembled in the station's main conference room. "Both governments are demanding their citizens back, but neither trusts the other with the information these two now share." Across the table, Elder Quinn represented the Nexaran perspective. The ancient being's skin displayed complex patterns that spoke of deep contemplation mixed with frustration. The Nexaran High Council views this bond as a sacred occurrence. To forcibly break, it would be considered an act of spiritual violence. "And Earth Command considers it a breach of security protocols," Ambassador Voss replied. "Dr. Cross has clearance for classified research projects. Liaison Keth presumably has access to Nexaran strategic information. Their bond makes them walking diplomatic incidents." In the observation gallery above the conference room, Vera and Keth sat together, watching their fate being debated by others. Over the past week, their connection had deepened beyond anything the medical teams thought possible. They didn't just share emotions anymore, they shared thoughts, memories, even dreams. "Can you feel what I'm thinking about?" Vera asked quietly. Keth's skin shifted to amused blues. "The vacation you took to the Colorado mountains when you were 12. The way the snow looked like crystal dust in the morning light. And I know about the crystal singing ceremonies on Nexara Prime, the way the entire city harmonizes during the seasonal celebrations." Vera leaned against his shoulder, marveling at how natural the contact felt. "Is it strange that I feel more myself when I'm with you than I ever did alone?" "Not strange," Keth replied, his voice carrying harmonics that now naturally blended with human vocal patterns. "Perhaps we were always meant to be more than we were individually." Below them, the debate was growing heated. Admiral Torres pounded the table. "They're compromised. Neither can be trusted to act in their species' best interests anymore. Because they've learned to act in both species' interests," Elder Quinn responded calmly. "Is this not what diplomacy should achieve?" Dr. Webb, now serving as the medical advisor to both delegations, stood to present his latest findings. "The neurological integration continues to evolve. They're not losing their individual identities. They're creating something new. A hybrid consciousness that maintains distinct personalities while sharing core experiences and values, which makes them perfect double agents," Admiral Torres muttered. "Or perfect ambassadors," Ambassador Voss said thoughtfully. She had been quiet for most of the discussion, but now she leaned forward with interest. "Dr. Webb, in your professional opinion, Could this bond be replicated artificially? Not with current technology. The quantum resonance chamber created the initial conditions, but the bond itself appears to be a unique interaction between these two specific individuals. Attempts to recreate it with other subjects have failed completely. Elder Quinn's skin. Patterns shifted to something that looked almost like a smile. Perhaps the universe creates what it needs when it needs it. A universe doesn't make strategic decisions, Admiral Torres snapped. Governments do, and both of our governments have decided this situation is too dangerous to continue. Ambassador. Voss activated a holographic display showing legal documents, which brings us to the formal proposals. Earth Command wants Dr. Cross returned for indefinite detention and study. The Nexron High Council demands Liaison Keth's immediate repatriation. Both governments are prepared to use force if necessary. In the gallery, Vera felt her heart sink. Through their bond, Keth's distress mirrored her own. "They're going to separate us," she whispered. "Then we must make a choice," Keth said, his skin cycling through determined patterns of silver and gold. "Remain and fight, or ... double quotes, or what?" Keth was quiet for a moment, and Vera could feel him considering options through their shared consciousness. Or choose a third path. Below, Ambassador Voss was outlining the separation protocols when the gallery doors opened. Vera and Keth descended the stairs hand in hand, their presence immediately commanding attention from everyone in the room. "With respect," Vera said, her voice carrying new harmonic undertones learned from weeks of consciousness sharing. "We believe you're all missing the point." Admiral Torres stood. "Dr. Cross, you're not authorized to address this council." "I'm not Dr. Cross anymore," Vera replied calmly. "Not entirely. And Keth isn't just a Nexron liaison. We've become something new, something that belongs to both worlds and neither." Elder Quinn's skin brightened with interest. "Explain." Keth stepped forward, his voice now carrying traces of human inflection patterns. "Through our bond, we've learned that the differences between our species are less significant than the similarities. We both value knowledge, family, beauty, growth. We both fear isolation, destruction, meaninglessness. We've seen through each other's memories that both cultures are struggling with the same fundamental questions." Vera continued. "How to grow without losing what makes us unique. How to explore the galaxy without becoming conquerors. How to maintain peace while preparing for threats." Ambassador Voss studied them carefully. "And you believe your bond gives you insights into solving these problems?" "We know it does," they said simultaneously, then looked at each other in surprise. Even speaking in unison was becoming natural. Admiral Torres looked alarmed. "You see? They're losing individual identity. This proves the bond is dangerous." "No," Elder Quinn said slowly, his skin displaying patterns of deep contemplation. "I think they're showing us evolution in real time." Vera took a deep breath, feeling Keth's support strengthening her resolve. "We have a proposal. Neither of us wants to be separated, and neither of us wants to betray our people's trust. So we're offering something different. We renounce our citizenship in both governments," Keth continued. "We become citizens of the galaxy instead. Ambassadors without allegiance to any single world. We'll share what we learn about interspecies. Cooperation with everyone," Vera added. "Human colonies, Nexron settlements, any other species we encounter. We'll be bridges, not spies." The conference room fell silent. Ambassador Voss leaned back in her chair, studying them with new interest. "You're proposing to become the first truly interspecies citizens. Representatives of cooperation, rather, than competition." "We're proposing to become what we believe the galaxy needs," Vera said, "and what we've already started becoming anyway." Elder Quinn's skin displayed approval patterns. The Nexron High Council would support this arrangement. Having neutral ambassadors could prevent many conflicts. Admiral Torres looked skeptical. And what guarantees do we have that you won't eventually choose one side over the other? Vera and Keth exchanged a look, and through their bond, they shared the same realization. We can't choose sides, Vera said. We literally share each. Others' perspectives now. Betraying humanity would mean betraying part of myself. Betraying Nexera would mean betraying part of Keth. We are living proof that different species can become more than the sum of their parts, Keth added. Isn't that worth more than the intelligence we might theoretically leak? Ambassador Voss stood slowly, her expression thoughtful. I need to consult with Earth Command. This is unprecedented. As do I with the High Council, Elder Quinn agreed. As the delegations filed out to consider this unexpected proposal, Vera and Keth remained in the conference room, still holding hands. Think they'll accept it? Vera asked. Through their bond, she felt Keth's mixture of hope and uncertainty. I think, he said, we've given them the only solution that doesn't end in tragedy for everyone involved. And if they reject it? Keth's skin shifted to determined patterns. Then we'll face whatever comes next together. We've already proven we're stronger as a unit than we ever were apart. Vera squeezed his hand, feeling their shared strength flowing between them. Whatever the governments decided, their bond had already changed both of them forever. Now they just had to convince the galaxy that change could be a good thing. 6 months later, Captain Rio Nash stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Unity and marveled at how much had changed since the infamous bonding incident at Research Station Omega. Through the main viewport, he could see the swirling nebula that surrounded the newly discovered system, where 3 different species had established a joint research colony. Approaching the Harmony Station, his navigator announced. They're requesting permission to board for the cultural exchange briefing. Granted, Captain Nash replied, though he still felt a mixture of curiosity and nervousness about meeting the galaxy's most famous couple. When the airlock cycled open, Vera and Keth entered with the fluid synchronicity that had become their trademark. They moved like dancers who had practiced together for years, each anticipating the other's movements. Vera's appearance had subtly changed over the months. Her posture carried some of Keth's graceful bearing, and her eyes held flecks of silver that seemed to shift in certain lights. Keth's skin now held more stable patterns, influenced by human emotional expression, and his voice carried human warmth, alongside Nexeran harmonics. Captain Nash, Vera said, extending her hand with a smile that seemed to contain multitudes. Thank you for agreeing to this mission. The honor is ours, Keth added, his greeting carrying both human friendliness and Nexeran formal respect. We've heard excellent things about your crew's adaptability. Captain Nash shook both their hands, noting the way they seemed to share each other's awareness even during separate conversations. I'll admit, I'm curious about how this arrangement has worked out. The reports from Harmony Station have been remarkable. 3 species working together without a single diplomatic incident in 6 months, Vera said proudly. Turns out that when you have mediators who literally cannot favor one side over another, negotiations become much more honest. Keth's skin shifted to pleased blues and golds. We've discovered that most interspecies conflicts stem from miscommunication and assumption rather than fundamental incompatibility. As they moved toward the briefing room, Captain Nash noticed other crew members watching with fascination. Vera and Keth had become legends, the first successful interspecies consciousness bond, the first galactic citizens, the first truly neutral ambassadors. The Zephyrians arrived last week, Vera explained as they settled around the conference table. They're a silicon-based species from the outer rim. Completely different biology, completely different social structures, but the same fundamental drives for knowledge and growth. Our bond allows us to serve as translators, not just for language, but for conceptual frameworks, Keth continued. When the Zephyrians express something that doesn't exist in human or Nexran culture, we can bridge the gap through shared consciousness. Lixon, a young Nexran scientist who served as their research coordinator, joined the briefing via holographic projection from Harmony Station. Her skin displayed excited patterns as she began her report. The Agricultural Cooperation Project has exceeded all projections, she announced. Human soil techniques, Nexran bioenhancement, and Zephyrian mineral processing have created crop yields 300% higher than any single species achieved alone. Captain Nash reviewed the data on his tablet. And the cultural integration? Surprisingly smooth, Vera replied. Turns out that when you remove fear of the unknown, different species are mostly just curious about each other. The Zephyrian children have been teaching human and Nexran kids their crystal-singing games. And human teenagers have introduced both species to something called pranking, Keth added with amused harmonic undertones. Though we've had to establish some interspecies guidelines about what constitutes harmless fun versus potential diplomatic incidents. Lixon's projection flickered with laughter patterns. Last week, a group of mixed-species adolescents convinced the Zephyrian elder that human ice cream was a formal greeting ritual. We spent 3 hours explaining why covering someone in frozen dairy products is not actually a sign of respect. The briefing continued with reports of technological breakthroughs, cultural exchanges, and the establishment of the first truly integrated interspecies community. But Captain Nash found himself most interested in observing Vera and Keth themselves. "Can I ask a personal question?" he said during a break in the technical reports. "Do you ever miss being individual?" Vera and Keth exchanged one of their synchronized looks, and Nash could almost see thoughts flowing between them. "We are still individual," Vera said carefully. "I still prefer coffee over tea, still love Earth's ocean storms, still get frustrated when experiments don't work. Keth still enjoys Nexran crystal music, still meditates every morning, still thinks human humor is inexplicably random. But now those individual preferences exist within a shared framework," Keth continued. "I understand why Vera loves storms, because I felt them through her memories. She appreciates crystal music because she's experienced it through my consciousness. We've become more ourselves, not less," they said together, then smiled at the synchronicity. Lixon's projection shifted to contemplative patterns. "They've inspired something remarkable at Harmony Station. Other species are requesting consciousness-bridging research. Not bonding like theirs, but temporary connection protocols for better understanding." "And Earth Command?" Captain Nash asked. "They've stopped seeing us as security risks and started seeing us as strategic assets," Vera replied. "Turns out that neutral ambassadors are incredibly valuable for preventing conflicts. The Nexran High Council has declared our bond a cultural treasure," Keth added. "They say we represent the best possible outcome of first contact." As the briefing concluded and preparations began for the next phase of their mission, Captain Nash found himself optimistic about the future in a way he hadn't been since joining the Colonial Service. Watching Vera and Keth work together finishing each other's sentences, sharing silent communications, supporting each other's weaknesses while amplifying each other's strengths, he began to understand what evolution might look like for consciousness itself. "Where to next?" he asked as they prepared to disembark. "The Andromedans have requested mediation for a territorial dispute with the Centauri Alliance," Vera said. "Completely different biology, completely different cultural values, but the same basic need for resources and security. Plus, we've had reports of unusual quantum signatures near the galactic rim," Keth added. "Possibly evidence of another consciousness-capable species." "First contact again?" Captain Nash asked. "First contact again," they confirmed together. And Nash could hear the excitement in both voices. As Unity prepared to depart for the next system, Captain Nash watched through the viewport as Harmony Station grew smaller in the distance. The joint colony blazed with lights from 3 different species, all working together on projects that none could have accomplished alone. "You know," he said to his first officer, "maybe the universe really does create what it needs, when it needs it." "Sir, 6 months ago, we had 2 species that barely trusted each other enough for basic diplomatic contact. Now we have proof that different forms of consciousness can not only coexist, but actually enhance each other. Through the CUM system." He could hear Vera and Keth in their guest quarters, discussing the technical specifications for the next mission, while simultaneously sharing what sounded like jokes in 3 different languages. Their laughter human and Nexaran harmonics, blended into something entirely new, filled the ship with a sense of possibility that seemed to touch every crew member. "Set course for the Andromedan system," Captain Nash ordered, "and send a message to Earth Command and the Nexaran High Council. Tell them their ambassadors are ready for whatever the galaxy throws at them next." As Unity jumped to hyperspace, carrying its unique passengers toward their next adventure, the galaxy seemed a little smaller, a little more connected, and a lot more hopeful than it had been just 6 months ago. Sometimes, Captain Nash reflected, the most impossible problems had the most beautiful solutions. All it took was 2 people willing to become more than they had ever imagined possible.